Don't know what I can do that, Tom. Believe that. Right. Showing what the thinking others do as though. Oh my god. Web engineering. Yeah, I didn't get much sleep. Gotta be proactive. Right. It's fascinating what you find out. There's all these people go to the beach in England. I've got a screen share. Right. I've got a screen share. What summer? Controlled world skies. That is the subject. Make them flock all to the beaches on the last weekend of meant to be summer. So the Freemason members can log up the businesses in the coastal and holiday type resorts. Yeah, but you tell me, anyone out there that's not looking up and waking up to the weather control system. So this is 5weather.co.uk in Scotland. Weather camera. These are comets. Nibiru, Planet X. Right, weather events due to channel. They got 5weather.co.uk. Right, time is 9. I don't know if I can get my lecture. I'm ventured out. I'm resting up, trying to. Yeah, so I'm doing a video. I mean, I just need to get. I don't know if I've got the energy right now, but I've got to check my electric meter and get it now. But it's just radiation is really strong. And I wish to goodness to me it's the Sabbath day. Keep it handy. So some basic washing done. And this excuse me, this skies. I mean, I don't know anyone else. I may not notice. Let me see if I'm streaming it on this channel. Yeah. So for me, cast you back your demons, your demonic spells, the witches and demons, mind control. Yeah, it's fascinating when I've been listening to my podcast. This is just amazing. I just, when I haven't uploaded a video, I check the train go in the background. You know, people are not going to realise it's a fun. There's a bag, a military bag, a bug-out bag. It's my next task to go through my storage, see what I've got and not got, and make a list. There's some things you can have, not have. This is not a natural sunset. It's not a natural sunset. Can you really realise that? Still fairly warm outside, so I will try and venture out to get something. Won't be too far. Because they beautiful women, I bet they'd affect their minds as well. Drinking all that on top. I don't drink. But apart from herbal tea. And yeah. I think I might be right to lecture it till next week. Because I really can't be bothered. I got food. I'm really just so tired. Didn't get much sleep really. Hacking into my dreams. So I'm just going to pick what this is in this other channel. Now the lower part of the screen. Now I'm going to the other channel. May just keep covering up. Oh no, you got another comment coming on the left of the screen. Moving to the right. I just took a Weymouth in Devon video. These are heavy connected. I'm getting radiated with the frequencies. It's interesting when you find out about the occult and you start to nothing. And back to the old documentaries and audios of Manaki Hall. Oh, I'm singing in the rain, just singing in the rain. What a glorious feeling! I'm singing in the rain. What is it raining really? I'm singing. Cloning humans. I tell you. I'm going to play in the background. So hacking me. AIBERK. An interview about time travel. Hello, time travel on TikTok. Oh wow, I love to be a time traveler. But your mind is uploaded to a supercomputer, and they've already made a clone of your mind, and yeah, be careful what's going on. Talking. Yeah, just don't. Do you want to stop hacking me for 5? What a great weird. Educate yourself to talk. I'm singing in the rain, just singing. I love you again, walking in the I'm singing, just singing in the rain. Oh, come on. I'm trying to share. Where is it? Right. Right. I haven't got the energy somewhere. Oh, come on. I'm trying to someone. This is demonic time. control my brain. You owe me compensation back into my brain. Really? Now I want to play my games now. Let's hack into a computer. Pathetic idiots. Pathetic. She's connected to the internet, so let's hack into a computer. Oh my god, that just went red. Oh my gosh. Did I capture that? That was time 9 o'clock at night. And I still got comments. Let me just play that back in my thing and see if I caught that. Then I'll just play random people in the background. Seeing that blocking people coming to my chat. Nothing new. Nothing new. Nothing new. Bigger solar flare. Earth directed. I'm
from the 20s all the way to the 50s. And in his monumental academic work, he, among other things, he noticed that 14 out of the 15 munition plants in Germany at the start of the Second World War were, in Russia. 14 out of the 15 munition plants in Russia were built by German technology, with German money, expertise, know-how, engineers, and management. And even to these days, the AK-47, the Kalashnikov submachine gun, fires with bullets that are the original German Mannlicher bullets for the rifle that the Germans had during the First World War. So basically, the Russians fought the whole Second World War with munition produced in German munition plants. After the war, I've heard stories that, for example, Rolls-Royce sold a whole factory for jet engines to Russia because the Russians were way behind, even behind the British, and the British were behind the Germans, just in time for the Korean War. So the whole Korean War was fought with MiG planes that had their engines built in a factory somewhere in Russia that was delivered by Rolls-Royce. Later on, I've heard stories about a whole nuclear submarine being sold to the Russians secretly in the 70s to boost up their submarine fleet because they were lagging pretty much behind. And so this Cold War confrontation was not very real. Everybody in the Pentagon knew that the Russians are behind in submarine production, so funding could not be appropriated by Congress for new construction. Or way back in the late 40s, when the Russian ambassador stole a nuclear warhead, a nuclear bomb, and smuggled it out of Washington in his suitcase and onto the plane. All these things do not happen by coincidence or through sheer geniusness of the Russian secret services. They are cleverly orchestrated and arranged at a higher level, conspiratorial level, higher than the leadership of the CIA.
It's just a saga of Diana King.
Okay, so why do cops in Montgomery County, and I say Texas, but obviously I don't mean all of Texas, but I have to wonder, they've been fucking with me for years. They started giving me the stink eye before this shit with Skip happened. Skip threw me under the bus over Montgomery County Sheriff's Department. They were stalking me. I was being stalked by Montgomery County Sheriff's Department. They were following me around everywhere I went. They were using my phone to track me. They were on my Facebook page. Skip told me that they were watching me. He actually confessed to me that I was being watched by the police. And I could never get a straight answer from the cops or anybody. The cops were douchebags to me about it. The sheriff's department, they would give me the fucking stink eye. I'd hear things like, "We know who you are." What the fuck is that about? What is that even supposed to mean? What was that even supposed to mean? Because of what, Facebook post? I was being stalked by the cops in Montgomery County over my Facebook post. And then they show up at my house and take me to a hospital and inject me with something to knock me out. And then they escort me. I am taken to a mental hospital and I'm given drugs that cause me to have a complete fucking breakdown. Because you should not give bipolar medication to people who aren't actually bipolar. And I'm not bipolar. I might drink too much, but I can blame the cops in Texas for that, for giving me a fucking drinking problem. But how many cops and first responders can relate? Being around cops makes you want to drink. Even if you are a cop, the shit you have to deal with makes you want to drink. And even when I fled Texas after they had me thrown in and kept me in a mental hospital over Thanksgiving weekend, which was a big fuck you. They chose to do that. This was just cruel, what they did. it was just, they were absolutely harassing me. Police brutality. And after I fled to Washington to escape them, 3 boys from Texas showed up and started manhandling me and keeping me from getting a job. And then I was forced back into Texas, and I ended up taking an overdose over being harassed by the cops, being followed everywhere, being denied employment opportunity. And they all just wanted me in Texas for some reason. I didn't want to be in Texas, still don't want to be in Texas, but they used this shit with Stephanie to get a warrant, and they're forcing me. They won't vacate the warrant. They won't let me just pay a fine because they know I was living in Illinois at the time these alleged threats were made. So I never had any intention of carrying anything out, but they won't let it go now, will they? They're hoping to force me to go back to Texas, and they're going, oh yeah, you just got to pay $750 to bond out. We all know that's bullshit. I don't live in Texas. They won't bond me out. They won't bond me out. And where the fuck am I supposed to live? And how am I supposed to eat? I'm supposed to be fucking homeless, or I'm gonna? No, you'll keep me in a fucking Texas jail until my court date, and the whole thing will end up getting thrown out. Anyway, and you know this. If Stephanie is so afraid of me, then why the fuck should I have to? I mean, you think this bitch would not want me anywhere near her? You're going to cost me a place to live and a job. You're trying to, I mean, this is what Texas is doing. This is what Montgomery County Sheriff's Department is doing. It's as plain as the nose on your fucking face. It's as plain as the nose on your face. And I want to know, what the fuck? I want to know what the fuck. What the fuck did I ever do? Because they were fucking with me long before this shit, before they sent me down a goddamn mental rabbit hole and caused me to have a complete break from reality because of the drugs that they helped force on me that I didn't need. And that much is clear. And, you know, all those videos from Texas of my behavior in Texas, they're gone. But, you know, I made sure to make a whole lot in Illinois because by then Kiwi Farms was involved. Tammy Hess has been involved, and I want to know if Tammy Hess is working for the sheriff's department in Texas. If they put a fucking hit on me. It feels like Texas put a fucking hit on me. That's what it feels like. And, you know, I've talked to cops in other places, and they agree, this is weird. There's got to be something more to this. There's got to be something more to it. And now I'm just a full-on witch. Now I'm just a practicing witch. And, you know, hexes are real. Curses are real. And I only curse in self-defense. I only hex in self-defense. I don't take money to hex people. I ain't that kind of witch. I don't take money to curse people. I know there are those who do, but I am not one of them. But if I feel like I'm in danger, if I feel like I have to defend myself from unjust attack by people who have guns and badges and who think they can just put their hands on innocent women and throw them in fucking jail cells because their fucking pride has been hurt. You are supposed to be above that, but I guess, you know, I mean, you know, Texas cops are not known for being on the side of justice. I mean, they stood by and watched a man murder a.
So she's a TI, but she doesn't know quite the extent how this program works. Joanna Kane, bless you. Right, I'm reading this because I want to listen to the weather effects. I'll be back. And then Tanya. And then Tanya. Then Tanya. So. There's shadow behind me. How have you been doing? They're controlling the weather. Everyone flocks to the coast. Who can afford a holiday? Times are limited. The full moon, the demons, entities around. The frequencies are very strong. I'm just trying to find the video thing, audio I was listening to. Time travel, 1992. Right. Let me see if I can actually get the website up. The radiate me if I lay down on my feet. Mind control. This is an interview and I'm trying to see if I can get the website up. Oh, the radiate my ears. Doesn't matter if I've got the Wi-Fi on or not. I'll wait for that. Sent me an email. Which one? I'm gonna have a quick look. Tired. This is what gets me when I start streaming, right? Oops, the first one. I'm just trying to have some rice. The first one. What I was watching, haven't uploaded a video yet, of UK seaside resort. How the heck can these people afford it? Are they all bloody members of the secret society, Freemasons? Or paid perps and having holiday breaks? Because don't they realise what's going about to hit the fan? And what about the homeless? Right? Got on the streets now. What about families stuck in B&Bs, bed and breakfasts? What about their income being cut off? What about people's jobs being lost? What about people who's lost their family members over the past 2 years? You know? Does everything's gone back to normal? No. It's all part of the plan. And this is what the interview is about. I was listening to. And so let's have a look at your email. You do know it's a control, don't you? You've got the same in your chest. Sorry to hear that. They've been talking about down here. Okay, so also I've heard this on a different platform. Military, well, allegedly, I've uploaded it, so, but some perpetrator pretending to be target individuals got me other channel strikes. I can't stream on that. Peace of troops. So, apparently, all the immigrants, all these people coming on boats in England for so long, allegedly putting up in hotels at the cost of the public and border agency and the agents. Ministry of Defence with the UN, United Nations, One World Army. New World Order, One World Army. Anyone can research that subject. Training them up to be soldiers, to be military. Members of the One World Government Army. And this is for England. So I'm not surprised with the date you quoted in the email for Australia, Tanya. Because next week, that's why I stocked up on my natural remedies. But I have to go out late tonight. I was going to put some cash into the other bank because I want to see if I can order some stuff on a well-known website. Natural, I've been searching, I can't find it. But tomorrow I'll be going through my bug out stuff. I haven't got a proper bag, so I need to. My time next couple of days is going through the storage I've got already in the food side. I've got my natural remedies, but the biggest thing I need is a certain larger bottle drops of golden seal for my teeth. When they radiate in me, they're damaging my teeth. So yeah, so I've saved up just enough. I'm not going to pay much out, and because I'm hearing exactly the same as you, and on different social media platforms. And there was a guy video, he was serious about it. And I know certain things, like other people, that are waking up to certain subjects. And there is a really good, I was listening to it earlier actually. Somebody did a podcast and it was something to do with the controlled Antichrist, the spiritual warfare, Tanya. So, it is a full moon. I'm treating this as it's unique this year, my birthday, right? The dates, the way it falls on a full moon. So I'm looking back at how old I am in the period of time when I was born and what could have been happening to my late mum at that time. And as I'm listening to these podcasts, a couple of them recently, I'm not surprised about the human implantation since the 1960s, before I was born. So that would have been my mother. That would be anybody else, and how and who, and it could happen anytime. And testing on the human brain. That has always been the ultimate, and when others put the links up, what other platforms they do. And so in England, all the strikes, all this 2023, 2024, massive inflation. And over here, I've been calculating it because I was going to get some more electric and gas. I thought I'd stuff it. At the moment, home invasion, tampering with my bloody gas boiler again. So I'm careful because I was taught all those years ago with my late mum how to use non-mainstream things. Oh, thank you for that video link. I looked at the cost of that. The collapsible camping style washing machine. Well, it's not washing machine. It's for small items. it wouldn't do big sheets. You'll need a larger twin version, and that is not foldable, and that is basically over about, I don't know, 100, 200 quid. And yeah, that'd be ideal. But the foldable one is always a very helpful, USB connection. But if you don't have mainstream electric, you're not going to be able to use it. So, if you any videos about Great Depression, I know full well how to do things by hand. And my late mum, in that period, it's all scaremongering, by the way, or what they're doing. Anybody out there can do things by hand. You can wring clothes out, you can get towels, to wring your clothes out or things like that. And you just make do what you got. Don't use as many things that you need to wash, and if you go and look at the Great Depression videos, I'm sure people still got them up there, and tips and things like that from that era. And then periods from the 70s. Now, if anyone has a coal fire, can you still use it? Because if anyone has a shed, safety, health and safety. But have you actually stored any of your stuff? Made it winterproof? I'm sure people that's been prepared for all sorts already done stuff like that. But when you're in this environment, well, put it this way, the only other thing I'm going to invest is another halogen heater, because that gives out light as well as heat, and the use of that is cheap. Anyway, they're all scaremongering anyway, telling you. Well, where's my channel? Oh, yeah. Right, so let's have a look. Just a minute, bear with me. I'm getting those pop-ups. Don't they like to have me? Right, just bear with me while I just make this from there. Right, okay. Right, that's why I was trying to get this website up. Right, whoops. Again, I've got too many tabs. Bear with them. Right. Okay. All energy companies, I can only quote about England. All companies buying in. This is the narrative being pushed. And that link in the video of that website, user channel, Tanya, is basically exactly. Now, it's a bit like anything with every winter when it snows and stuff. I just have to go through that same stuff I've got. And old-fashioned crocheting kits, woolly hats, and all the things I've done every bloody winter when it's really bad. But this time it could get even more, is to try and reduce your power. That's what you do. you time it so you don't have, you know, you only live in one room. Well, already practically do anyway. You heat your stuff. You just like keep it camping out. What I do anyway in my home. But it's a bit like that, right? These people on holiday really spending all that, and then they're gonna find how they're gonna pay for their gas, electricity. Do you know these demonic Freemason connections doing all this programming? They know full well certain procedures how to offset um, these hikes. The hikes are being manufactured. Right, let me just see if I've got into it now. Right. So, free energy, ESSA, you know, should always be free energy. And then don't forget about the combination with, you know, the advancement in, it's not just Agenda 21, is it? Agenda 2030, the radiation EMF. Right. Now, I was going to look for this. In England, it's known as Ofgem. So let me see if I can find which I found. Next week, right? These public servants work for the public, right? But I don't know if I can find this. Right. The former Chancellor of England. Load of BS. Says it was a mistake for government to empower scientists during the, you know, past 2 years. Then also, and he wants to be the welfare system. They want to crash the economy. They don't care about disabled people linked to failures on the public servants, on the offer of, this is, let me screen share this. This guy was got to the David 2018. They got to him to not help me anymore, but he's got a good website, so here it is. His mum used to be a barrister, Freemason most likely. Right, okay, didn't get into. I mean, I can't even travel out to the coast that day into these meetings. I would have liked to have gone. Right, ECHR, but however, still trying to follow the European Convention on Human Rights. They're trying to replace that, Tanya, in England. And it's all about the bigger picture, isn't it? The communists. Right. We first replaced human rights with a modern bill of rights. Effectively, UK government, remember, initiates the rights and are complicated restrictions depending on what title one is claiming, or if one is presenting as a living soul and ethic being. Genesis 2.7, and not claiming any legal title, and one not to be recognised at law as a person. And Article 6, right is respect. This is this article. Let's have a look further down. The same with the council tax, isn't it? Now you also got information about who is the person. It's about when you learn about certain things like this. Let's have a look. Right, 700 children allegedly being abused in care homes too in the UK. Go down here. So you got, why is Queen Elizabeth not the Queen of England? Articles in there. History. She got really helpful. It's not about energy yet. Club of Rome. When you find out the bigger picture, let's have a look. Yeah, so you pay £10, you might get in to their information. See, so I've been logged out of the website. I haven't used it in a long time. Anyway, that wasn't what I was looking for. I'll make this for a minute, turn it.
floppy, which goes to a portion which is normally locked. This is the so-called orgiastic floppy, which induces that state in the person who is wired up to this equipment, which now is a big pad with very tiny little probes, which are 50 millimeters square. And in the certain appropriate points of the body, they are attached, and we'll go into all of them, but all over the body in very critical nerve ganglia points. A person is pushed and thrown in, if you will, to the orgastic state, and then by computer, they can change that person's mind, memory, programming, whatever. When they're done, shut it off and install a final command that they don't remember anything that's happened. And then, of course, the person is released. No drugs. No messy techniques for the earlier person is released. And they can be no drugs, a patient. No messy techniques for the earlier patient at any institution that has its equipment. Private hospitals are not accepting federal funding, do not have the law requirement to carry such equipment, but it is recommended that they do. But every major hospital that has federal funding has required by law to have at least one of these machines there, and they're usually kept under tight lock and key. This is how far some of the programming techniques have gone in this country, and this is only one example. A friend of mine who works in one of the hospitals upstate New York has personally seen the equipment. And he didn't say he'd seen it in operation, but I think probably he has. And he knows exactly how it works and exactly what it's going to make it function, and that it can be used for the purposes. This took many years of research. After Wilhelm Reich died in 1957 in prison, he had to refuse to reveal what the government work he was working on in early 57. And the judge said his hands were tied. He had no choice but to commit him to prison unless he could show good cause why he should not. Which meant he had to talk about his classified work. And he says, I can't. So he went to prison and died there. And of course came the famous FDA book burning of Wilhelm Reich's works. They went around and literally confiscated thousands of Reich books, and in a particularly vicious form of Nazi book burning, went ahead and burned the books. These have been republished since, most of them. I think there are a few that are still out of print held privately. They didn't get all of them, of course, but they got them in the bookstores and the places where they were normally purchased. It was a form of Orwellian blacklisting.
The library, academic
Right. He was showing in all of his published works, which was not only his journals, Journal of Orgonomy, but all of the various magazines, the books he had written and published, which were many, about a dozen. They were showing the function of orgone energy, not only in terms of the human body, but in terms of the atmosphere, weather control, smog, the relationships of smoggy conditions in the Earth's atmosphere, how it's related to the loss of orgone energy in the atmosphere, and so forth.
Tape is about secret weather control.
Yes. That's very true. But radio sounds is cool. And these radio sounds, believe it or not, were designed initially and built in breadboard form by Wilhelm Reich in his laboratory in Rangeley, Maine. And they were shipped down to a neat little laboratory in Long Island called Brookhaven. And there they were beaten into a production form, found out how they could produce them by the thousands fairly inexpensively. And they did. Preston bought up nearly the entire stock in the United States surplus because they were banned after a certain point in time for being used. And the government didn't want the secret out that they were modifying the weather, not measuring it, because ground receiving stations were not fixed. Or they both was the transmitter. So what do you do with the transmitter if you have no receiver? Doing something else. And they were. They were modifying the weather on an experimental basis. The bigger units were capable of steering hurricanes. The AMT-6 started out with a little AMT-2, then a slightly larger one with a white plastic bubble on the top shaped with a point and then with a round section. And this AMT-4 was a little more powerful. And you use that as a more advanced form of weather control.
One of the earlier models.
This was the earliest model, the AMT-2, which comprised of this white portion. It had the same antenna in it. It was run by a battery pack. And the rest of it was a different kind of a box structure, which contained some elements, namely three sensing elements. One was barometric pressure. The other was a special strip which actually sensed the amount of orgone energy in the atmosphere and converted it to an electrical signal. The other one sensed the amount of Dor energy, which is considered the disintegrant orgone energy in the atmosphere, sensed that and gave it an electrical equivalent. And then went through a special modulator chopper system, and it was fed out in the transmitter. That's being one of the first ones, low power, which would then modify the weather experimentally in a limited area, from smaller to bigger boxes, and finally to the big AMT6, which in its final form, which you can hardly find anymore, was in a cylindrical tube. It stood about this high off the floor, about that diameter, and had a huge antenna that stuck out of the box about that long. And the antenna was deployed after it was in flight, so to speak. The large ones were taken up on a plane and dropped off a parachute. The smaller units went up in a balloon.
So basically, this is the manipulation of the micro and of the macro, from the mind to the weather.
Yes.
But to summarize here, so basically the Germans developed mind control through chemotherapy and hypnosis.
Correct. And they used very heavily scopolamine and other chemicals, but scopolamine was their principal weapon for hypnosis and mind bending, if you will. And it was used very effectively with hypnosis to change the mind and do programming under chemical means.
And later on, because not only the rocket scientists got shared by the Allied powers after the Second World War, but so were all other secret scientists, so were their SS specialists, Gestapo tutors, propaganda ministry specialists that were shared by the Allied powers. And obviously all these mind control experiments were moved in the other countries. Here in the United States, I've read a lot of books about parapsychology in the Soviet Union. In Russia, of course, the other goes wrong. Always one would read about such advanced technologies about the United States, but obviously they were everywhere.
In all the major countries.
Yeah. And so here, on top of the chemotherapy and hypnosis, obviously the United States will develop the other two methods, namely with implanted microchips and with some microwave radiation.
Yes, the earlier form of electrical stimulation using orgone Reichian techniques was one. They came to another technique under the more advanced mind control techniques, in which that was discovered by Preston Nichols sometime in the 80s. He found out about the other technique they were using, which was used and implemented at Montauk, the Phoenix Project. It consisted of a more or less standard low-powered radio transmitter, and he replicated the whole system as an experimental test. He took a 250-watt surplus radio transmitter operating at high-frequency range, which says between 3 and 30 megahertz, designed a special modulator for it, and then had a tape recorder, which had a tape recorded on it, which said, in essence, anyone hearing this message will call such phone number. And that phone number happened to be a Long Island phone number in the home of a friend of Preston's. He didn't use his number. Now, the criteria of this thing was none of the victims were to have and did have a radio receiver. What they were doing was broadcasting second-order energy, so the human mind decodes directly, as if it had a radio receiver. The human mind does have a radio receiver operating at second-order frequencies. Basically, a telepathic type of receiver. And you can make it work just as well with an RF transmitter, a radio transmitter, if you know how to do the proper modulation on it. Because we're doing with a tube-type transmitter, already emitting not only ordinary electromagnetic waves, which is first order, but second, third, fourth order.
And they don't go through the vacuum tube, but do not go through solid state.
Correct. And what they did, turn this thing on and let it run for maybe 8 hours a day for about 3 days. he wanted to find out, person that is, wanted to find out if this technique was valid, i.e. would people hear it in their heads? They did. They had a tape recorder, an automatic answering machine tied to his friend's phone number for about 3 days. They received over 600 phone calls from all parts of the eastern seaboard of the United States and as far away as Florida. When they finally went through them all, they found that there was actually only about 200 separate individuals on the board several times because this message was on the air for about 3 days. It stopped then because of the fact that somebody in the government found out what they were doing, located the transmitter, no problem with the FCC, with all their portable bands, and pulled off the transmitter. Next thing that happens, the tapes are recorded and the telephone system disappeared. And then sometime after that, the gentleman who let his home be used for this little experiment disappeared himself. But he proved the point. You can program a person, condition them in such a manner that from a specialized radio transmitter, they can receive a signal directly without having to carry a little box around in their pocket. The only box they need is the working brain up here, which will pick up the signal and decode it. And if they're already preconditioned, this is the key, they must be preconditioned by whatever programming is put into them. If they're preconditioned to hear the signal, you only see everybody, only people who've been preconditioned. They go to the phone, they call whatever number they're supposed to call, and then what can happen from that point is, this did not happen in this case, but what can happen is that some response, whether it be a machine or a person on the other end, would provide a secondary to which will then trigger the whole program, which this person has buried in them. And then they become the robot, the automaton, to do whatever they're doing, like
mass killers,
schoolyards, or at the tops of the Belfry Tower at USC Berkeley, which is a famous case there, where this guy went up there, gunman went up there with a rifle and shot about 15 people. That's could well have been. And you have the famous case of Sirhan Sirhan killing Jack Kennedy. He shot wildly. He hit Kennedy with one bullet, but it was proven forensically that the bullet that killed Kennedy never came from Sirhan Sirhan's gun. It came from somebody behind Kennedy, firing from less than 3 inches from behind his right ear. And that man was, of course, one of the guards. He was a substitute that day for the rear guard. They plan these very carefully. But then they have to have a patsy. So Sirhan Sirhan was a patsy. He was accused, he was tried, and he was convicted. He went off to prison. He probably never did any severe damage to him at all. Then you have, of course, the even more famous case of John F. Kennedy, where they said there was single gunman, single bullet theory, which has been so thoroughly exploded in recent years. There were at least 3 assassins. Some of the films show it. Some of the private photos show it. And of course, poor little Mr. Oswald, ex-CIA agent, was the patsy, and they sacrificed him, probably set up to call him the gunman. And if that wasn't enough, of course, in the basement of the police station in Dallas, Mr. Jack Ruby runs forward and pulls the trigger and shoots Mr. Oswald on national television. He didn't die then either, by the way. He died on the operating table later. They made sure he was dead before he left the operating table. And he said himself, that is Oswald, I didn't kill anybody. He never pulled the trigger. He wasn't even on the 5th floor. And that shows very clearly in the movies. These kind of mind manipulation techniques are everywhere. The problem is you don't know who is pulling them or what they intend to do with them or how far they intend to go.
What would you comment on the implantation of microchips into the human brain for the purposes of listening to the sounds around the person, maybe even getting visual signal from what the person sees, to from one point on turning the big master switch and assuming control over that being and actually commanding it what to do. In one of last year's issues of the Mutual UFO Network journal, the MUFON UFO journal, there was a very good article of about maybe 24 papers in official academic medical journals about implantation of microchips into pets and human beings, into human brains, for the purpose of mind control. Some of these papers were from the early 60s, which means that more than 30 years of such research has been going on. This is a topic very important in the field of ufology, with all this mind implantation by the little grays going on. And it has been my suspicion all along that many of these techniques have been in the arsenal of the government, and so one should look first of all into his own government and then into some aliens doing this massive implantation. Rumors are that from 1 in 40 all the way up to 1 in 10 from the United States population have been implanted.
Well, if you go into the history of this type of mind control by signal, by external control, you go back as early as 1960 when Dr. Delgado was experimenting with implanted chips in the heads of bulls, and he proved in the ring in Spain, I think Barcelona, that a charging bull could be stopped in its tracks by flipping a switch on a little electronic control box and a radio transmitter, which affected this chip buried in the bull's head. The bull,
like a radio control model.
similar to a radio control model, except he was doing a very simple signal transmission, which caused the bull to turn aside and was set up in some manner, which made a very effective control of the bull. He lost his anger, or he was just directed to turn aside. It was publicly demonstrated. That was only the beginning. Nobody has been able to find out exactly what Delgado did since then, but of course, you have the spectacle of the CIA continuing, and as microchips were produced, you have had implants which have been found in people's heads by the proper high definition, not radar, but X-ray systems, and also the MRW systems, or MNR. They can also find these chips. But you have more than one class. The initial class was probably developed by our government, possibly in conjunction with alien technology, and possibly strictly on our own. But then you have certain documentary films which the Japanese have produced showing, after interview of people and putting them through CAT scans, they can show implanted devices directly in the brain. They cannot figure out how they got there, and they know damn blessed well they can never remove them because it would kill the person to try and take these things out of the brain. And they cannot explain how they got there. They cannot understand the technology involved because it's not terrestrial technology. It's one of the proofs about UFOs and ETs. Some of these implanted devices, they defy any medical skill we have to put in the head where they are.
Maybe they were beamed inside,
It's hard to say how it was. It's hard to say how it might have been done. But they're there. They're easily visible in a layer by layer CAT scan into what part of the brains are in, and very often they find two of them, one on the left lobe, one on the right lobe. What effect they have is unknown because it's not been detected in some of these cases that the individuals had particularly erratic behavior. But the technology is there, the technique is there, and where the line ends between U.S. government hardware and control and alien technology and control is very hard to say. But this is, the evidence is they're working together. They're working together.
One for the other.
Exactly. Going to the Phoenix Project, one of the aspects there was mentioned the radio device, radio transmitter for human people, brains properly set up to pick up the signal and respond. You have other types of technology which have been developed as a result of the continuing work at Phoenix, at Montauk, elsewhere. Because you must also know that there were 25 stations. Every SAGE station was converted essentially to a Montauk type operation, though they didn't all stay online. Eventually, only about 3 left. And how many other projects buried elsewhere were going on, we don't really know. We know of 2. ITT Corporation, who was the contractor for all of the hardware for Montauk, that is for the Phoenix Project at Montauk, also had some ongoing side projects, Brentwood, Long Island, existed for many years, actually since sometime after the turn of the century, a overseas communication system known as McCabe Radio Overseas Communications. About 1966, the system was brought out by ITT. It was no, those were standard, ordinary communication using regular. Only they had a bank of about 52 transmitters there for different frequencies that were set up for continuing overseas communication, which was voice, which was teletype, which was fax, and everything imaginable, both black and white and color fax. The transmitter site was in Brentwood, and after it was shut down, which was in the fall of '86 when I was there on the island, we went through there and found that they had been experimenting on other projects on the side, and some of the transmitters had some non-standard equipment in them. We found other non-standard equipment around, and we finally located the chief engineer of the site, who admitted that there were major changes in installation, which he had no understanding of what they were for. They had the regular traffic, and they had direct tie-ins to ITT laboratories in Nutley, New Jersey, through dedicated phone lines direct to that site, for inputs that he had no idea what they were. He said it was totally controlled from ITT Nutley.
It would have been for some special communications, not to Europe, but probably to outer states, the moon bases.
Could well have been. Now they had a parallel project going on with certain other aspects, which the transmitter site had a receiving site. The receiving site was not in the same location. They moved it about 30 miles away to Southampton, Long Island, and there they had the gigantic receiver site, which is still essentially there. The transmitter site was demolished and converted into a industrial park, which is all you see now as an industrial park from about '87 onward. But in that site, some strange things went on, and the story of how this project came down is even stranger. Might be worth noting. We had to track back, and Preston Nichols was very heavy in this because he's a radio amateur and he's in the radio amateur clubs. And he had been by that place many times. One October night, with he, Duncan, and myself in his van, headed up to the place. He wanted to show me this vast transmitter site. He says, I don't think we can get on in there, but it's there. Well, the gates were wide open. The guards were gone. The power was off. So we drove in and drove around and wandered all through the place. And they had not yet started demolishing the main transmitter building. They had demolished some of the smaller buildings, peripherally, which may have had some manufacturing facilities. We're not sure. But we went through that, saw all of the transmitters, and there were some very strange charges left on them. Eventually, of course, the amateurs were invited in to strip the place, take anything they wanted, because it would save the contractor the trouble of removing it. So the amateurs had a field day. They took down 5 towers, 120 feet high with the rotating antennas. They saved the antennas. They took everything you can imagine. And when they were done, they still had literally dozens, tens of tons of hardware to scrap. Transmitters eventually were bulldozed. What was left of them. But we couldn't understand why this place shut down, because it was a functioning overseas communication system. Well, finally, the story filtered through from ITT Corporation's headquarters in Maiden Lane, New York, about a very strange occurrence in one night in September, actually a Saturday. ITT had planned to shut this facility down on a permanent basis because they really had a little more use for it. And that particular morning on a Saturday, they gave instructions by phone to the station master that this was to be the last day of transmission. There'll be some traffic that come through, and they would have shut down to secure the transmitter on a permanent basis. So he received his orders, and throughout the rest of the day and far into the night, the transmitter remained on. And it was receiving traffic, and nobody at the Nutley end or New York could figure out what was going on. They had orders to shut down the station, and it was not shut down. It was accepting traffic and transmitting. So they sent somebody out from New York to investigate. He arrived that night and started to go on base, took one look and said, I ain't going on this place. The transmitter building, with all of the transmitters, which was quite a large structure, was glowing with a blue glow over it. Something which was totally abnormal. He wouldn't walk on the base. The whole was surrounded with gates and fences and all of this. He wouldn't go on the base at all, and he went to a telephone and called Nutley and said, "There's something very strange going on here. I refuse to set foot on base because of this very weird blue glow. It doesn't seem normal at all." Attempts for Nutley to contact any of the personnel on the base in the latter part of the afternoon, the early evening were futile. They got no answers on the phone. So they said, "Okay, don't go on base. We'll come by with the crew in the morning and we'll shut down the power from the substation outside the operating area," which they did. Then they went on base. Nothing wrong, everything appearing perfectly normal. All the equipment was there. 12 people on that base earlier in the day had vanished completely, were never found. Not a trace. They finally had to tell the families, these people that disappeared, how they handled it, I don't know. But about 3 days later, they fired up the equipment to see if there's anything wrong with it. They found nothing wrong with it, whatever. Everything, piece of equipment on that base operated properly, but nobody was there. So ITT shut it down, and a little head scratching finally says, "Okay, we don't want anything more to do with this place, get rid of it." So that was when the order came to sell it. They found somebody who was a developer of industrial properties. They bought it lock, stock, and barrel for $5 million cash. They finally found out how much they paid for it. And ITT told him, "You get everything." He says, "We don't want all this transmitting gear." He says, "You got it all. We don't want it. It's your problem." So that's where it came a famous offer to the radio amateurs to come in and have at it and take anything they wanted. And they did for 2 weeks or 3 weeks. And of course, eventually everything was torn up and the transmitters were destroyed, the buildings were leveled. I was there when they were doing it. In the underground facilities, there were some extensive underground rooms. They were so strong that they supported the bulldozers without bending at all. What they did with that, I don't know. But they eventually cleared everything, and it's now a large industrial site. There's no trace of the old transmitters, towers, the buildings, or the site. But that story was weird, and that whatever was going on at that station, apparently the station or something connected with it wasn't about to be shut down. So into the blue, and about 12 people. Somewhat reminiscent of what happened at Montauk not too long before, except there was a different phenomenon. That's some of the strange things that have turned up in Long Island in the process.
This reminds me of these additional byproducts of the Philadelphia technology way back in the 40s when seamen were disappearing off the deck of the Eldridge, and then somebody else appeared, another seaman appeared in Italy, buried in a brick wall. Then that barroom pipe,
Yes.
that came out of nowhere.
Yeah, those are all interesting stories. The one about the barroom fight is documented. I do have the newspaper clipping finally, which documents a group of sailors coming out of, as they put it in the paper, the rear room of the bar room, fighting and engaging in a brawl, and involved themselves with the customers in the bar, and bar stools were overturned and things were damaged. And they estimated $600 worth of damage, which was quite a lot of damage in 1943. And the MPs and the SPs were called, and the police and the shore patrol all off the sailors, and the Navy said they would pay for the damage that was done. The only problem with the story was there was no back room in the bar. There was nothing but a wall. And it would appear that these sailors came out of the wall, probably connected with the Philadelphia experiment. We don't really know, as it's never been run down for the ultimate answer as to where they came from. The other story I've heard once, and I've not been able to get any data on it, is that about the same time, a sailor, an American one, turned up buried in a brick wall someplace in Italy. Quite dead when discovered, the body was half buried in the brick itself. And this was very reminiscent of what happened on the Eldridge, where 4 bodies were buried in the steel, 2 horizontally in the deck and 2 vertically in the bulkhead walls. The phenomenon that was created by the Philadelphia experiment in the final test was enormous. It was very far-reaching and was very, very destructive of many things. And we perhaps do not yet know the full story of what it really did. But we do know that the Navy, of course, wouldn't leave it alone. Eventually had to pick it up again in 47, which I've already outlined.
But these were a story here, a very interesting story that I heard on American radio, American Forces Radio in Japan in the late 70s, about a big rock that was a program phenomenon, Fortean phenomenon. One night, a big rock, huge boulder appeared out of nowhere in the middle of the city square of an American city on the East Coast. Next morning, all the city elders gathered. The rock was so big they couldn't hold it in any truck. They had to cut it in pieces or to dynamite it. Scientists were called in, and one of them said, "Well, maybe this is a materialization of some material out of a different dimension." And I said, "Nah, different dimension. My left foot. That was almost 20 years ago, and I have absolutely no idea about time travel, about different temporal dimensions and so on." Yeah, the Fortean phenomena were absolute taboo in Eastern Europe, and still are widely unknown. But the program ended with the words, and the name of this scientist was Albert Einstein, and I clearly remember to this day cold ants crawling down my back because I realized that there may be something more serious to this rather than just a simple joke. Then I remember another story in a science fiction magazine. My personal feeling is that many of the science fiction stories that we read, and even many of the tabloid reports that we read, and that the supermarket checkout lines are daily bombarded with these messages. I subscribe to most of the tabloid papers. The Wiki World News is my favorite one. My feeling is that this is a very subtle way of manipulation and education of the whole society. But it works on a principle similar to the immunization of an organism with a weakened poison or a weakened disease, so that the organism can develop its antibodies. In this case, the lowest strata of society that doesn't read anything else but tabloid papers serve as this sacrificial lamb that is exposed to the dangerous, threatening information, and through many years of such bombardment, they finally learn to live with UFOs visiting us every day, or the government manipulating space, manipulating time, manipulating the genetic code, creating hybrids between humans and animals, between humans and aliens. And in many ways, the science fiction literature has been serving the same purpose. There are so many stories that are written after a carefully orchestrated or designer leak, as I call them sometimes, happens, and some intelligence like his friend who happens to be a writer, a nice best-selling story or short story or novel appears on the market after some time. So in this science fiction story, two British constables discovered one night a talking head that was appearing, protruding out of the pavement and smiling and talking to them. And little by little, more and more human parts and half bodies and whole bodies appeared out of the pavement, out of bricks, out of walls, out of ceilings, out of everywhere. So this is a very interesting attempt to acquaint the public with the possibility that it is possible to walk through walls, that it is not that difficult and dangerous. And obviously these are signs that secret programs have been going on behind the scenes. For me, every story that I read in the tabloid papers is an indication that some research of that type is going on somewhere behind the scenes, and somebody is interested in educating the whole society, so that 20 or 50 years later, when this research would be put out in the open, in public, in the academia, there wouldn't be a massive panic or suicide. What other byproducts, negative byproducts of the Philadelphia experiment would you comment upon? Or maybe some of these first nuclear tests that we were talking today that had some very interesting starry effects.
Well, we can go into the nuclear test program, but first I would point out the phenomenon which has been discussed and described is certainly not new to this century. Charles Fort, who was an ordinary newspaper reporter, century and a half ago in England, we start investigating some of these strange occurrences and reports he heard. And of course, like most other people at the time, was very skeptical, but started clipping these newspaper files, and he wound up with some 50 or 100 shoeboxes full of clippings, which wound up being eventually the property of the Fortean Society. He wrote a series of books, Land of the Damned, and a few others, in which he concluded that basically we might be the property of somebody else. But he documented so many of these strange occurrences, like frogs falling out of the heaven, fish falling out of the heavens underground, and other strange falls, even parts of bathrooms and sinks and what have you, angel hair, animals, just coming out of nowhere. There has to be an explanation, but none could be found at that time, and the scientists, of course, ignored it. These things have been going on through quite a period of time, and they're not new to us. But this sort of thing continues, and we have these barroom brawls, which may have been induced by hardware that we controlled. Who knows what caused these other phenomena 100 years ago? When we came on to the era of the nuclear energy, where we dropped the bombs in Japan, we had atomic tests in the Pacific in 1946 and 47, which were essentially ordinary atomic bombs. I use the term ordinary advisedly because it kept growing in size and power. But in 1952, when Edward Teller created it, they were ready to test the first hydrogen bomb. And in 1954, they tested the second one. And when I remember, my dates are correct, with the second test, they had an enormous problem with. They decided they wanted a 3-mile-long tunnel to instrument the rate of propagation of the explosion. And it's very carefully instrumented with very precise equipment, because EG&G instruments all of these tests, has from the year one and still is to this day. No one else will or can, because they control all the patents. But in any case, all of this very nice equipment was built, measurement equipment, time zero markers, and so forth, and it's high-speed cameras. So they detonated the device, and as the photos from Life magazine showed, and some of the movie films they showed, a mushroom started to form at the island where the device was in the building, and then all of a sudden it was full-blown, full-size, covered more than the island. The measurements down the tunnels they expected would take about 18 microseconds for propagation if c is the maximum speed of travel of light or anything in this universe, according to Einstein's theory. Well, the bomb went off, and it was t equals 0 everywhere. There was no propagation rate. It was instantaneous to the end of the 3-mile tunnels while they lasted. And this threw all of the physicists into a tizzy. And literally throughout the physics books, it says, well, we're back to square one. We start over. And none of the physics we know works or means anything anymore. And of course, one of the other aspects was life somehow got a hold of the photos. And as the huge, not mushroom cloud, but hemispherical glowing sphere of light with strange patterns in it started to rise and thin, the aerial cameras which were photographing this whole thing caught some very strange phenomena. You could see from the camera and from the pictures which were published by Life that we were looking through the fireball into what was apparently another universe. We were seeing stars. I never forgot that when I saw that in the issue of Life, and I found out later from channels Life was almost put out of business over that. They were very severely reprimanded. However, they didn't even know how they got a hold of the photos, but they did, and they published, which I think the public has a right to know, but the military didn't feel the same way about it, particularly the AEC. Right, who cares about the public seems to be the attitude. They never detonated another hydrogen bomb. For a simple reason. 54 was the last one. They scheduled one for 56, but it was never detonated. They canceled it because it was to be an underwater test, and they decided, in view of what happened with the 54 test, where not only did they lose the 3-mile tunnels, but the entire island was vaporized, and it went down and burning and boiling down to bedrock, and of course burning and boiling in bedrock for 3 days afterwards, till the ocean water finally damped it out.
They started kind of a chain
They
reaction.
started a chain reaction in the rock. Certain scientists had so warned, and others said, "Oh, poo-poo, this can't possibly happen." And those who poo-pooed it, of course, were those who ran the tests, and they were performed, and they found out it can happen.
They were afraid that the second explosion may ignite the very water of the ocean.
They were
Of the planet.
They were afraid of this for the simple reason that H2O is the most common substance on Earth, the most common compound, and it's everywhere. And if somehow you manage to start a chain reaction in the water itself, it would go through the entire oceans everywhere, and it would be essentially the end of the Earth. They did not fortunately set off such a reaction, whether it's damped by minerals or whatever else, I don't know. They were fortunate that that did not happen. So no further tests were banned, and then of course the Russians got their H-bomb tests. Exactly. So they had their one and only test, which I believe was about 1959. And they expected, according to the reports which came even from Khrushchev later, about a 30 megaton yield. They got a little bit more, something they would never admit how much, but it was in excess of 100 megatons. And the Russians said they would never set off another hydrogen bomb again, because it was totally out of control, as far as they were concerned. Their mathematical models or predictions, the so-called nuclear theory was a pile of garbage. I don't really know what's going on, and I know personally a nuclear physicist, published 125 papers, and used to teach at USC Berkeley, who said the same thing. He says the nuclear scientists have no idea what's going on. They don't know what's going on with nuclear processes, period. And this from a nuclear physicist.
This is the famous explosion on an island in the sea north of Siberia, basically the northern ocean. That
That's how delusional she is.